Hi, Bill.
Hi.
You okay?
Good. Yeah, actually, I'm today's a good day so
Oh,
far.
good, good.
Um, I've got my clearance for my surgery,
Yeah,
and just waiting for the scheduling now, and
yeah, yeah.
I should be able to be back to normal within a few weeks.
Oh,
Oh,
brilliant. That's
thanks for
good to hear.
asking. Thanks for asking. But today so far,
Hi,
um,
everybody. Sorry, my
yeah.
voice is shot, but hi, everybody.
Yes, hi,
Oh.
Jerica. Don't talk, don't talk. We're just glad you're here. So, it, it's I think we're gonna have a good. I was just making a couple of notes for today's meeting. Hi, Stu. Glad you're joining us today.
Good morning. I am glad to. I've
I
got a 7 a.m. meeting interviewing some leaders for the WashReg in the future.
oh, okay. 7 a.m. Wait a minute. What time is it where you are now?
6 a.m.
Oh, you're on the West Coast right now?
Yeah, I'm in Portland. I live in Portland.
Oh, you live in Portland. Okay. You know, there's a funny story about Portland. My grandfather came from Denmark, and we had some cousins who had never been to the United States, and they decided they wanted to visit us. And we lived in Portland, and so they flew in, but they flew into New York. They rented a car and they drove to Portland, Oregon. We lived in Portland, Maine. So here they are out in Oregon asking people, how do I get to this address with the return address on an envelope? I
Boy,
just realized they had driven thousands of miles in the wrong direction across the country.
yes.
And
Yeah,
they
that,
so they get to see a lot because they had to drive all the way back to the East Coast.
yes. They saw the whole country.
Yep.
There's a funny story, true story about how the names came about. There was a growing community, and it came time to name a city. And there were two very strong advocates that were respected in the community. One wanted it to be Portland, the other wanted it to be Boston. So it
Uh-huh.
was decided by the flip of a coin.
That's so funny, so interesting.
Your
So,
comment on community assessments is right on. I'm very aware of that. Some of it will be included. Um, these come in a variety of different formats, justification for an NGO program, parachuting programs, all kinds of different ways they come to the grant staff. And so I don't want to make it impossible for these to come through because the staff
yep,
will allow them through,
yeah.
but we want to give guidance. So yes.
Actually, one of the things I want to talk to you about because you told me a little bit about some of the things you're working on right now. I have a meeting on Wednesday. Uh,
Uh-huh.
I have volunteered, and it looks like they want me involved in developing something very similar to what you're developing for Rotary
Mm.
for Congo. That's the Conference of NGOs at the United Nations. And so they that pretty much is all of our well, the biggest association of NGOs at the United Nations, NGOs that are in consultative status to the United Nations ECOSOC. So
Wonderful.
the we've had some initial talks, but it looks like we're wanting basically to do the same thing. We want to go and add value added to all the efforts of NGOs around the world in that they're doing in support of the SDGs, for example.
Is there money available to support that?
Um, I don't know. I'll find out on Wednesday
Yeah.
what where they're at. They've got a small team established. They do have a permanent staff.
Good.
Conceivably, they do. The woman who is sort of heading things up, she definitely has at least a basic understanding of the AI tools that are available. It seems that she's done some work with agent technology and with things like Notebook LM. So
That's
that'll
a
be
good,
interesting.
yeah, that's a good starting point. The fellow who's helping me is an AI professional, and he's using um, Cloud Code, virtual machines, interactive processes. He's educating me on how to do this, and I'm guiding him on what we want.
Yeah.
And so it's a great team, but
Mhm.
it is very limited by money.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
if we
Yes.
had $10,000 alone, that would really enhance the process.
Yeah.
And for your group, if they had $100,000 and some architects and staffers, you could guide them through a really great process.
I don't think here they've got the money in that kind of category. The dues that NGOs pay to be members of Congo is relatively small. And given that they're already paying to be part of ECOSOC, I don't know. But there are some NGOs that are part of that are very large. So conceivably, if we can go and get a couple of these major NGOs to champion this effort. That would bring us a long way. Because they're just starting here, a lot of it is just helping NGOs learn how to navigate all the UN agencies and departments and so forth, and realize, okay, what you can do and what you can't do. Because, for example, NGOs cannot submit resolutions for votes to the UN. That's got to be done by a member state. So, how they can find advice how to navigate with the member states to be able to interact with the agencies and so forth and so on, and then what each agency is able to do and not do. So it's basically building that kind of a knowledge base similar to what you're doing here with Rotary. But I do have one thing here that came out in a lot of what I was researching on the whole gamut of how can we maximize the impact and leverage of Rotary in general. And one of the things that came out is I attended a Pels conference here in March, just before I threw out my back. And at that meeting, we had about 300 incoming presidents there. And the biggest push that Rotary International made at the conference this time was not image and things like it was really the community needs assessment, which is a big part of the Rotary strategy. So Rotary was basically saying they're trying to move to where basically you can't get projects approved anymore if you don't have the corresponding documentation of the needs assessment. And in discussing that with, I think I was primarily using Claude and Gemini for that particular discussion. The real thing came out was that AI could be of tremendous advantage in doing the needs assessments. And
Yeah.
Rotary, in the process of Rotary, could provide the tools to Rotary clubs to be able to complete needs assessment. Rotary could build the biggest database of global needs anywhere in the world and be in a position then to be able to go and say, okay, hey, we've got 4,000 locations that have this similar need so that we can come and then bring together the resources to be able to say, let's come up with the solutions to this particular need, taking full advantage of all the economies of scale and everything else, and then tying that together with the funding possibilities. So it actually I went through the process of saying, okay, well, what specific tools and what specific vehicles and methods and so forth could AI actually use to support the needs assessment. And it's very interesting because it came out and basically said one of the biggest problems we have in Rotary right now is most of the projects are starting with clubs saying, we want to do this. And they're saying that's you should never do that. you should always go and start with your needs assessment that tells you where's the opportunity cost, where's the biggest advantage to your community. That should drive the process. So I'd like to really talk to you about that, because if we could go and have Rotary uh, put together the kit to accomplish the needs assessment and tie that to a global database, where we're able to analyze, we look at the SDGs, or the areas of focus, to be able to say, okay, hey, here's where the biggest problems are. Here's where we could have the biggest impact. And we can then do things at a scale that gets everybody talking about us, gets the UN wanting to work with us, their agencies.
So you're speaking my language. I'm part of the scaling community practice for Rotary, and we have discussed that and been trained by a true expert who just happens to live in Portland. He's one of the founders of the scaling community practice worldwide. And if you include government data, government initiatives and rules and agencies, along with the SDGs, along with the AI supportive analysis, and then the Rotary clubs can join hands to work together as a group, a Rotary team for the region or for the country. Then you have something that's really powerful. And I have some ideas on that. I've consulted with people who did the Rotary USAID WASH partnership. So yes, we can talk about all that.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds great. Okay. At any rate, there, I see I'm late getting started here. So let's get the show on the road. Ding, I'm Bill Graham. I'm the president of the Rotary Dare to Be Great Global eClub, the go-to place for those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world, the whole world, and daring enough to try. So today is 6 June 2026, and I declare this meeting to be open. The topic for this meeting, during the last week, we had some other meetings talking about some specific initiatives. And one of the things that hit home was how many people still they don't believe AI is going to have that big an impact on the world, or at least not as quickly as some are predicting. So originally we wanted to talk about education, and because we've got some additional evidence that really is so solid, so rock solid, of what would be needed to radically close the education gap, potentially worldwide. And I hope he joins us again today, a gentleman from Sierra Leone last week, who works for their Department of Education. His job is to visit schools around Sierra Leone and sort of evaluates how well they're doing and advising them. And it was so interesting because his on the ground experience there in Africa uh, matches so closely with the problems that we're seeing in developed countries, like the United States and European countries. So this is very interesting, but we will pick up on that here. We've got a lot of written material now on that, and I will try to get that out earlier, before next week's meeting. Another thing that came up here, and Jerica could speak better about this, but her voice, I don't want to stress her voice at all. So I'm just going to just mention it very briefly because we're not going to really go into that today, is the idea that some people of influence in Africa who are concerned about um, conflict, or at least sort of a division, if you would, between North African and Sub-Saharan African countries, where there's sort of an animosity brewing that was exacerbated by a football game, a soccer game, where there was disagreement about some of the referees' calls, which caused one team to walk off the field, and then they came back, but the jury said no, they walked off, so they are disqualified. So even though they won the game, they took the championship away from them and gave it to Morocco, and that caused a lot of bad blood. So they're looking here to say, let's create a Pan-African peace movement. And these are very influential people. One of them has his over 250 million followers on his social media. They became aware of our project called Vision Africa 2030, which is all about getting all of Africa to be able to have a vision of the Africa that could be if all the SDGs were accomplished in all parts of Africa for all people. And so the idea is if we could get people in Africa to all have this shared vision of this fantastic Africa that could be, and then having people come up with ideas how to move the whole continent closer to that vision, and basically recruit uh, hundreds of millions of strivers in Africa that are looking in every community. Okay, how do we move our community a little bit closer to what could be? And there are parts of Africa that so many people are not aware of. For example, I found out here that the main geographic area in the United States for pharmaceutical R&D, a lot of that has been outsourced to Nigeria. So Nigeria here is in some ways a world leader in pharmaceutical research. Who would have thought? Or if we look in the area of artificial intelligence, there was that robot that really, Sophia, I think was the name that everybody was talking about several years ago. And I think she was made an official citizen of one of the Gulf countries. But a lot of people are not aware that a lot of that AI of Sophia was developed in Ethiopia. So the on the one hand is making people aware, even for the residents of Africa, to get them to realize, hey, we're not the bottom in the world here in terms of development. We're right in the middle, and yes, we can be better. But so get that vision, get them to believe, yes, we can do it. So this is something here that we're going to want to talk about more in the next week or two. Can we leverage this major effort to bring together North and South Africa to in this peace effort, but then take this peace effort and convert that momentum into an effort to literally close the gap between developing countries in Africa and developed countries. And it doesn't have to take a long time. If we look at China in a little more than one generation went from being one of the absolute worst countries in the world in education to being the world leader in education right now by a big margin. And the economy, anybody who's traveled to China has seen, this is probably one of the most advanced countries in the world for a living standard, at least the eastern provinces. I can't speak for the western provinces, but in the eastern provinces, there the level of education of the people to talk about what's going on everywhere in the world and the awareness, the technology advancements and transportation and healthcare. Healthcare. We're going to maybe look here because we're talking about AI. I'm going to try to show you two videos a little later on that show where we are with some of these AI, especially in healthcare, especially in elder care, and in the area of education. what's going on there, because that does two things. One is it shows us some of the positive advantages that AI could bring us all. But it also shows us how real, how far things are, that in parts of the world we're not talking about what could be. We're talking about things that are actually there and in use already. Okay, so anyway, but so we have these uh, two things here going on with regards to education, and here the one thing I'll just give a little hint on education. The almost all the world that are trying to improve education. And we looked and we asked about how many conferences and workshops are held each year around the world with regards to education. And it's over 100,000. And the interesting thing about it is we asked how many of those uh, took into consideration something other than the teachers. How many of them had any discussion about all education alternatives other than teachers? And the situation we found is that almost the entire world equates education and teaching. They see, oh, education, that's teaching. It's all about teaching. But in reality, when we look about how do we have the impact on closing the education gap, it's not about what the teachers do. It's about what the students do. It's about what the learners do, about what the learners achieve. And it seems that there wasn't any of these conferences, of all these huge number of conferences, that was focused primarily on learning, that did not make the teachers be the primary focus. Teachers, curriculum, and so forth be the core of the discussion. So one of the things that came out is mathematically, if you don't have mastery-based education, in other words, if your education system is based on what the teachers send out or what the education systems disseminate and broadcast to students, that is no guarantee that it is coming, it's landing, and it's achieving the result you want. But if you go and make the focus of the education system not what is broadcast, but what is actually learned, in other words, mastery, and saying, okay, you cannot proceed to try to learn anything that you have not yet mastered the prerequisites for. This is not just education, this goes to anything. We called it a law of nature in the discussion that we had on Wednesday, that you cannot achieve something that you have not achieved the things that is dependent on. So if something is dependent on something else, you have to solve that something else before you can get to your ultimate goal. So the answer to that is mastery-based education. And although we see a lot of teachers are very afraid of talking about mastery-based and problems related to it, when we get down to the actual the practice and how it works, most teachers say, "Wait a minute, I'm a teacher because I want to help young people be successful. I love working with young people." And the mastery-based system says to teacher, okay, you don't have to spend all your time preparing lectures, giving lectures, grading papers and stuff like that. No, you can take your time and devote it to being a mentor coach and coach those young people to be successful, just like an athletic coach. And when we describe it like that, they really love the idea. But the problem around the world is the education system has been around for several hundred years, and that's the way it's always worked. So getting change enacted, getting it to even be possible. A lot of government agencies literally block any education system that's focused on the learning. There was a case here of a state in the United States here that looking at a teaching method, a school system actually, that in a couple of years managed to get to be in the top 1% of all schools in the United States at every grade level for every subject. And they said, no, we're not going to give that school a license in our state because they're not teaching the standard way, which is failing everywhere. We've in New Jersey alone, there's 73,000 children attending schools that have an average of fewer than 10% of students at grade level. Anyway, so the idea of having mastery-based education on the one hand, and the other key thing to education is that children of lower socioeconomic backgrounds or rural areas, the early childhood development, they are not exposed to as much of a rich environment and language exposure and so forth. So those children, when they hit kindergarten or first grade, they are starting between 2 and 4 years behind some of the other schools in terms of mental maturity, verbal vocabulary, general knowledge, and just brain development. There's a coding that as in your early childhood, especially up to age 3, and your brain is hearing all these things. If you've got a parent who's well informed and educated and is spending all their time just talking to the child, explaining everything around them, what that is and why that is what it is, and just talking to them, that serve and return with the child is what develops the brain. And the children who don't have that, it's not only that they start school so far behind, but because at the age where that brain development is supposed to take place, it didn't take place for those children. For most of them, the school system can never make up for that. They just literally don't have the brain then to be able to learn at the same speed. That can also happen in certain rural areas. It can happen, not so much the brain development, but the preparation for children who grow up with a mother tongue that is different than what is spoken in the school system. That puts those children at a big disadvantage. So those two things, we're going to spend time in an upcoming meeting here where we're going to go into detail those two different things that are basically prerequisites. Everything else that we do to education is almost damned to fail for the majority of children in those categories. And we're seeing here, for example, in the United States, that's now more than 50% of our children. More than 50%. We had just in the year before last, the most recent national report card on education in the United States said that 40%, the highest it's ever been, 40% of all fourth graders, 10-year-olds in the United States have not achieved even basic reading skills. That means they're functionally illiterate. And most of them are never going to go and recoup that no matter how many years they spend in education. And we see in some of the school districts where we're seeing the worst cases of that, that the dropout rate, the number of percentage of students who don't complete secondary school is approaching 50%. So real problem. So we'll get into that. But what was very interesting was to see that it's not just in developed countries, but we're seeing in developing countries because a lot of them are copying the methods used in the developed countries, that we're seeing the same problems for the same causes. So we can start mapping out how do we change that so that we give young people a real chance to acquire an education. And it's not about AI. It's not AI is going to solve it. It's a simple thing of saying, hey, we're not going to push you to learn something if you don't have the prerequisite knowledge to be able to learn it. We're just setting those kids up for failure. Okay. So anyway, those are some look aheads at some of the things that want to talk about. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about AI from the perspective of to what degree do all of you really agree, hey, AI is going to have this major impact in a relatively short time, or have the feeling that, well, nah, it's not going to happen like that. I don't think it's going to happen like that for this reason or that reason. And we want to explore some of those, why people think the way they think and where we see AI going within a relatively short time. And I want to do this across four dimensions. The first is in the dangers related to AI. And there's three major danger areas. The first is that AI could escape human control and just decide that humans are too much of a bother and decide to just wipe us all out. The second is bad actors. And this can include all the criminals trying to figure out how they can use AI to um, advantage themselves over the rest of us. But it also includes entire countries who are looking to weaponize AI or use AI in weapons for geopolitical reasons. And the third is it's just that the disruption, the AI related disruption to the world as we know it, and that is the economic aspects. What happens if there's no jobs for humans because AI simply is exceeded everything a human can do by so much in a short time. So those are all on the danger side, the negative side. And then we have on the positive side, some of the AI positives, and there's some really big headlines just recently come out here in disease prevention. We're making huge inroads to cancer, to many cancers, in a relatively short time. And then in the area of education, that although we see certain problems, those problems with education are mostly political, not the process, if you would. And so we see that within education, there are things taking place that are enabling people to learn how to do things that they maybe never thought they'd be able to do in a far more efficient and shorter time frames. So those are the key things that we want to talk about. Any comments first before I get into uh, starting the discussion on those things? Anybody have any comments about the agenda or about the things that we'll be talking about in the next couple of meetings? Yes, Mark Henry.
Hi. Um, just confirm you can hear me well.
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. I'm using a different headset. I had a slight twist to when I saw the agenda, and I thought it may not necessarily be very helpful to us as the way we set ourselves up as a think tank, as the focal point of where such knowledge is going to be emanated and then dispersed through the Rotary fraternity. May not be very helpful for us to debate what our opinion is on whether we think AI is going to be as transformative as it's set out or not, whether it is going to be the next electricity or it's just going to be another hyped up thing. I think we should be spending more of our energy structuring our interventions and then seeing how can we deploy them. I always think about the challenge you set us and say, how can we deploy $2 billion and move a dial tangibly on at least one of the 17 SDGs. And I think that we need to focus on, irrespective of what AI does or what the next technology does, or we still have to make these differences. We still have to move the dial on those things. And I would say, yes, I mean, as somebody who's philosophically minded, it stimulates my intellectual curiosity to know what other people think. But looking out of my window at people in Kampala who I'm not sure whether they had breakfast. I'm not sure whether they've had something small to eat for lunch, but they're not walking with a lot of energy. That intellectual curiosity is not making a difference in their lives or the lives of the people that they have left at home.
Yeah.
So that is where I concur with
Yeah.
you on the program, but I think it may be diverting us from
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
vision
Yeah.
we set for ourselves.
Thank you, thank you. That's a really great comment there, and it gives you an opportunity to explain why the issue. Of course, our club, as we've always said, we seek to be of the greatest service to our community, in our case, which is the whole world. And we see being of the greatest service being helped to protect our community from uh, severe and potentially existential consequences of major problems facing the world. And one of the biggest issues that is being seen, if we obviously here, if bad actors figure out a way to be able to use AI to target entire cities, to wipe cities out and so forth, yeah, preventing that, of course, would be a major, major important factor just because the severity if that should happen, is so great that we couldn't allow that to happen. And you may have seen just within the last couple of days, the CEO of Anthropic, Amadei, he called on actually, I think it was Microsoft, OpenAI, and Sam Altman, and Anthropic, with along with a whole bunch of scientists, who basically described the where weaponization is currently going, and it's they called for immediate action to block certain kinds of transactions from taking place because it is so easy for AI to literally wipe out billions of people in an extremely short time. And that I don't know if there's rumors or it's just because they're aware of how easy it would be that this becomes an emergency to do something about. So that's in the case of protecting against bad actors. There's also from what's his name? The former CEO of Google, Schmidt. He's part of a committee that's advising the American government on AI defense and weaponization. And he just recently gave a speech saying how far along they were in being able to have these weapons that just are unbelievable in their capability of what they could do that would just nullify all the vehicles of warfare we've known until now to make them almost ineffective. So that's on that side of it. On the area of AI escape, there's also there's a recent panel discussion that took place with scientists from the United States and United States, Canada, and Japan or China on the risk of AI escaping and potentially deciding here that humans are a liability to the world. So protecting against that becomes something where we say, well, look, what can we do about that? Well, if we do nothing, and should it happen, it could be all over. So even though it's hard for us to be able to imagine what can we do about things like that, we can't ignore it because the risk, should it happen, is so great. Finally, with regards to displacement, human displacement, and that is what we're really talking about today in a big way, is there were conferences. There was a conference last summer at the United Nations, Financing for Development. Then there was the conference in November in Doha, the Second World Summit for Social Development, and which they were saying, okay, how do we close the inequality gaps around the world? How do we close the inequality gaps between developing and developed countries? And this was a follow-on to the first global summit, which took place in 1995 in Copenhagen, where they said, okay, development is the answer. We've got to share the development around the world, because development leads to jobs and jobs leads to income. And that's the way we can close the inequality gap and combat poverty and so forth and so on. There was a side event in Doha where they discussed, hey, you know what? You're not looking at the impact of AI, that the governments and the United Nations, you're sort of pretending here that the world hasn't changed since the late 1990s. But what if AI displaces all the jobs? And what if it does it very quickly within the next 5 to 10 years? Why are you going and saying, let's make a 20-year investment for solutions that are not likely to survive the next 5 to 10 years? And that there was a discussion on that, and they got into things like universal basic income, and then a big discussion about why that's not really going to work, because it's going to lead to what they call techno-feudalism, where a handful of people have all the wealth and money, and everybody else is just a dependent, if you would, on the state of mind of those top two or three people that own and run the whole world. So this is why we have to look at that, because if there's a train heading straight for somebody with a baby wagon that's stuck on the tracks, that we can't go and say, oh no, let me finish my coffee, because that train's still far away. If we don't see something that we believe is going to stop that train, the time to act is now. And all the studies we've been doing have been saying that if the big layoffs start before there's some kind of a plan in existence for how, some kind of contingency plan for how do we peacefully transition to a post-labor world, then it'll be too late. Because once the people are believing that their wealth and the way they currently live are at risk, they're going to hunker down, and then we end up with a conflict between the people that don't have anything and have no wealth. So this is why this becomes very important to discuss. And where we run into the biggest problem right now is when we look out the window and we say, well, look at this problem here now, look at that problem there now. And this one is a maybe problem. Maybe that'll happen. But again, the if it happens, the risk is so great to the world as we know it, and to billions, literally billions of people's lives, that can we risk it? This is the equivalent if we, some people say, I forget who, Jeffrey Hinton, the so-called godfather of AI, who said there's a 20%, he believes there's a 20% chance that AI will wipe out humanity. And but then you hear all this, well, but that means there's an 80% chance it won't. Why would worry? Why worry? 80% chance it won't. Okay, well, you know what? If you took a revolver and you put
Gillette.
one bullet in the chamber and spin the chamber, are you willing to pull the trigger? But wait a minute, you're not pulling the trigger here. Point that gun at your children and your grandchildren and then pull the trigger. Are you willing to do that? Hey, it's an 80% chance, the bullet's not in that chamber. Are you willing to take that risk? And I think that's where we are. And that's why the discussion that we need to really assess what is the likelihood that, for example, AI will exceed the capabilities of humans in every dimension. Aaliyah, yes, you have your hand up.
Just to say, AI has already destroyed the jobs market around the world. And also, AI is not a green technology. It requires a lot of energy. So how sustainable is it in the long term?
Yeah, no, you're bringing up some very other additional points that are very important. And we look at that. At the same time, we do have to look at the efficiency, with the speed with which AI is becoming more efficient. It's just that the usage is going up so fast that the demand for resources is still climbing. But there are a lot of things that the people doing that work are seeing, that the energy demands and things like this are going to go down in the very near future. They believe that. Whether that's true or not, that's something also to discuss. But if they believe that's not going to be an issue very shortly, either because of fusion technology, because of what we're seeing in alternative energy, for example, the degree in China that the speed with which they are building these data centers there in the water and other places there, so that they don't run into some of those problems. And then you see Elon Musk looking to put the data centers in space. So, you got all these different models there. One of the most interesting ones is there's been a successful experiment taking biological brain cells and getting them to actually do compute the way we do it, to be able to communicate between biological and silicone thought here. So yeah, there's a lot on that side that's very important to discuss. The jobs, I think most people say, hey, you know what? Look, the people still have jobs. Maybe they're not the kind, but we see in the college graduation market here, that's starting to collapse in a number of fields. And the expectation is by 2027, we'll start to see significant job losses. And the problem is not that the job losses have taken place. If people believe the job losses are coming in the next couple of years, that's already enough to change the way a lot of things work. Stuart, please.
These are all great points, always intellectually stimulating in this group. I appreciate it. The parallel processing that is happening that speeds up work, the lower energy systems, the increasing grid, all those will help. The dampers, there are a lot of dampers on AI. There's fear, there's government regulation that's probably going to come, but it's always too slow and too late. So as I said in my question, how do we keep these choices to be made quickly between government, society leaders, and AI technology groups? It's unprecedented to make those kinds of decisions quickly. They happen very slowly. They happen based on popular uprising and representatives of government agencies, at least in democratic countries. That's why China has such a big advantage because it's an autocratic government. They can make plans and implement plans without much debate or slowdown.
Mhm.
But I'm curious how the known risks can be really understood by leaders in a way that they can then say, I need to take action before the
Yep.
populace uprises. I need to help guide the populace into the future. Um, the little conversation I had with ChatGPT just now about education says, don't try and give children facts. You have to prepare them emotionally and mentally to create new frameworks because that's where the future is. So it's as the Chinese say, we live in interesting times. These are very interesting, complicated, and confused times.
But I think here you really bring home an important thing. We've always said we have to set our goals based on what's needed and not what we think we can do. And if we feel, governments in general are reactive, they're not proactive.
Yeah.
And but we're in a situation where the world is moving so fast that by the time you get around to saying we have to do something in reaction, you don't have enough time to really do it anymore. So what we have to look at is, okay, uh, we got to wake people up. The problem is that they don't believe it. And that's where we get into like today's discussion. How inevitable is this? And how do we get people to realize that? It's a natural thing. People don't like change. And so, if they think, yeah, change is coming, but you know what? Hey, I'm just going to go about my job today, just like I did yesterday and the day before. Yeah, maybe it'll happen in the future, maybe it won't. But when something is so severe, that potentially so severe, then we can't take that attitude. We have to get people to realize what's going on. And this problem, by the way, is very, very close to the problem in education. I may have mentioned Tim Vandenberg, this teacher in California, uh, who's uh, who implemented a mastery base program in his sixth grade math class, and he at that time he was in one of the worst school districts in California, way, way, way below passing. I mean, basically, most of his sixth grade students were still at a second or third grade level. And yet by the end of the year, almost all of them had truly mastered sixth grade math. And how he did it, he sent them all back to kindergarten and said, here, you go back there, you fill in all the holes of your knowledge, and so you're building on solid foundation. And they were extremely successful. But his teacher or his principal said, "Oh, it's really great what you're doing with those students, but your job here is to do what the state calls for in the education, in the teaching." And you're teaching. So I'll let you do your mastery base with your students, but you've got to do the teaching. So here he's spending almost entire class time having to do something that is of no value to his students because his students don't have the prerequisite knowledge to understand what he's talking about. And the principal, my understanding, basically said, "Look, our job is not about the successful learning of the students. Our job is to carry out what the state calls for us to do." And I've heard that now from a couple of principals. Our job is not to educate the children. Our job is to provide the teaching. And so, this is how do you bring about change? There is a woman in New Jersey. Um, uh, she's very, very wealthy, more than millions. And she spent here several $1 million last year on TV advertising it's called Wake Up New Jersey, to make people in New Jersey aware that because you got an A or a B in your report card in school, that doesn't mean you have that knowledge because we see an extreme gap. Schools inflate the grades for social promotion, and she's trying to wake people up that you're hurting your kids. We got to change that. So it's very similar to us. We have to look for ways. How do we wake people up? We were trying to do an initiative. We weren't able to do it for last November for that Second World Summit to lobby the participants of that conference to be aware that you can't take the 1995 solutions and use that to say what we need to do now. We need to look at the situation that we have now and figure out what we have to do. So this is why I think what we've got to do is we have to understand the risks that our world is facing relative to AI, and then figure out what do we need to do to avoid those worst consequences that could potentially be existential in each of the dimensions that is a danger. Mark Henry, does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I've been part of the discussion for the past year, so I appreciate the context. And of course, I do appreciate that every time we do get newer members coming in, so it's good to give everybody the context. So we are moving forward together. But I feel we're going to spend a lot of time. This is already a year, and I know you've been going for several years in contextualizing, and yet the problems are probably not getting linearly more complicated. They may be even getting exponential. So we need to
Yeah.
find a way of getting ourselves to get traction, some action, some movement, and then in parallel, we can go on so that rather than move for a waterfall approach, we may have to take an agile approach so
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
course correct along. And this is where this group again will be very good energy.
Yeah.
So we may even just say that how about we dedicate a few meetings to helping you prepare for those big meetings that are coming up. I think you said August, September with the UN, and then we say, okay, fine. So that will be a deliverable.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
presented, and then we kind of move on. So we are doing action while we're using the power of this network to then also continue assessing effectiveness and then reconceptualizing.
Yeah, no, you're right on target there. What we're looking to do is when we go and say, hey, we've got to figure out how do we uh, get, for example, the UN to get an agenda going to talk about how do we come up with a contingency plan for that peaceful transition to a post-labor economy on a world scale. Because otherwise, the risk is that countries that have a high GDP per capita can implement some kind of a universal basic income, and their citizens might be able to be okay. But developing countries that don't have that, they just get written off, and they're left to their own. So it's important here that there be a global approach to doing this, and the place where you can do that is at the UN, for example. So even though we weren't able to accomplish at the scale that we wanted to in November at the conference in Doha, the UN is now starting to move, and we've got three committees going addressing these various aspects of the dangers of AI now at the UN. So we now have a start of the discussions. They're still way too slow. They're still not, like there's a saying here, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And we're still seeing at the UN that they are putting more energy into pursuing um, solutions that would not be, they wouldn't survive if the certain AI developments take place within the next 5 to 10 years. But at least as a beginning of the discussion. In the UK, there's a minister who is now starting to really push for the awareness. And in the United States, we have a senator, Bernie Sanders, who has he's doing an incredible job. He's learned in the last year. I've actually seen him go from a position of we got to stop all this to really just creating the awareness, spreading the awareness. So I think here things are starting to happen, but we need to get all of you to be saying, okay, how do we influence these people? What can we do? Things like this Africa Peace Initiative that came out of the blue provides an opportunity. Can we leverage that? Can we attach some things to that? So, on the one hand, we can use that to uh, get more people and visualizing the Africa that could be if all the SDGs were achieved, and start momentum in that direction, but also having the momentum of saying, okay, somebody in that group has to start thinking about, well, if AI results in all of the production that was moved to developing countries, low wage countries, now getting pulled back into the developed countries because robots and AI will do it for even less money. What's the impact for on the developing countries? We did a little experiment about 6, 8 months ago with looking at the country of Togo and asking, okay, what would be the likely impact of the AI development there? And the result was something like 30 something percent reduction in per capita GDP in less than 2 years, which would bring almost all the investment in education and healthcare to a standstill, especially because at not only here do they lose the export revenues, they lose most of the transmittances of Togolese working in other developed parts of the country, sending money home. But also aid is going to radically drop because those countries that are providing most of the aid funds today are going to be struggling with the loss of jobs in their countries and figuring out how they're going to do what they're going to do about that. So we 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 need to have each of you thinking, okay, how do we do this? Specifically now, how do we come up with a strategy to influence the committee discussions at the UN? How do we go and perhaps get the media so that the media is uh, creating awareness for situations, not in a way that's going to scare people into inaction, but a way that is going to inform them of what people are doing to try to prevent the worst cases from happening, or in trying to advance the good stuff, like we talked about, the disease prevention. The news just in cancer treatment of the last week is such an amazing example of that. So the idea here is you're 100% right. We need to get subgroups going where we discuss solutions and we don't just talk about the problems. So right now, most of my time of the last year or so, I probably spent more time talking about awareness of the problems um, than in talking about potential solutions and how we get there. So I think that's where we need to go more. Aaliyah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, all this is based on the feeling that the UN has influence. But, is the UN actually a powerful body anymore? Or is it just a talking shop?
Now that's very good. I found out here surprisingly because an election cycle was missed in the in one of the substantial committees of the NGOs at the UN that I'm still the vice chair of the NGO Committee for Education, Learning, and Literacy at the UN. And this really gets down to us. And the project I'm working about with the conference of NGOs at the UN is saying, okay, how can we create better value added to be able to um, help the UN? Until now, a lot of the NGOs that are affiliated with the UN are only affiliated there because they want to lobby the UN to do what they want to do in their NGO. In other words, they're not there to help solve the problems that the UN, the goals like the SDGs that the UN have set out. They're there to say, oh no, we want you to make this a priority. We want you to make that a priority. And this has resulted in to one degree, a lot of the member states. I hosted a panel there of representatives from UN missions from different countries to the UN during COVID. And they said one of the advantages of COVID is that they didn't have to spend so much time with NGOs because all the communications had dropped down. And at the same time, like you're saying, we're seeing here, I've talked to ambassadors who have told me that the UN is finished, that the UN is going the way to League of Nations. They've got no influence and nothing is happening. And there's a movement in the UN, for example, to say that the UN needs to be restructured. Why should five countries that represent, with the exception of China, only a small fraction of the world population have veto rights over all the other countries? Especially, why should countries with 50, 60 million people have more say than a country with over a billion people? Looking at France versus India, for example. The question is how a body that is their goal that or they were set up to be a body of talking. The purpose of the UN was let's talk instead of fighting, right? Because this is a follow-on after World War II of huge destruction in the world due to war to say, no, let's talk. So
But they had the backup of military victory and military power,
no, those,
didn't
yes,
they?
but that was the situation in the 1940s. But moving on, the whole idea of the SDGs and before that, the MDGs, which all came out of that first global summit there on social development, the realization that a lot of conflicts in the world begin because of inequality, because of desperation and so forth. So the idea of these development goals, which is the current version of the Sustainable Development Goals, are if we can reduce the inequalities, if we can reduce the desperation, then we're going to reduce the likelihood of conflict. And so this is why this shift. But it takes more than just saying, oh, we agree that's the goal, that's what we should be doing. It needs some kind of action plans to say, how do we accomplish that? And the NGOs, civil society, could be playing a very major role in that if they were not focused on how do I manipulate the UN so that they talk about my interest in uh, dealing with green tree frogs, or something very, very narrow, specific that's my interest of my NGO. We have, for example, there's NGOs whose goal is to get the whole world to be speaking a new language that we make up just so that the world can all speak the same language. And that's an NGO. That's their goal, to get the UN to back that goal, that we get rid of all the current languages in the world and everybody switch to this new language they want to create. So the issue here, though, is when we look at the SDGs, okay, where is the NGO community organizing themselves to assist in achieving the goals? Because the UN, they don't have any, some of the UN agencies do, but the UN itself does not have a mission to be able to act, to do anything. And even within the agencies like UNESCO or UNICEF, that they in turn have the member states, they are also just associations, but they're associations where people have dedicated resources to say, yes, let's actually act to achieve some of the goals. But are we supporting that, or are we just complaining that they're not accomplishing what needs to be accomplished? And this is where we can have a major role. Rotary, with our 46,000 locations around the world, for example, we could do tremendous good if we were able to work together with the UN, that can bring the member states together so that we can create cooperations on economies of scale to actually accomplish things. And part of our strategy when we talk about engagement, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the number one priority that our club sees, or the number one problem, is the lack of engagement. The UN calls it the lack of multilateralism, or the decline in multilateralism or international cooperation in accomplishing things. And this is a major problem. So we've looked and said, to what degree can civil society contribute to bringing people together to work on these major problems? And we can do that. And to Mark Henry's point, we can't just go and say, oh yeah, we're going to focus only on AI, or we're going to focus only on preventing nuclear war, because starvation is a real problem in the world. Pandemics is a real problem in the world. So as we've said many times, we don't necessarily know where the ultimate danger is coming from. There's so many different problems in the world that could be very severe and even existential. And if we miss the one that eventually wipes us out, we have failed. We failed our community, to protect our community. So we have to look at all these problems. Today, we're happen to be talking about AI. Why? Because it's the one we believe is coming the quickest, that has the potential to most quickly have these severe and potentially existential consequences for the world. And what this means is that should we fail to get the UN or the whatever bodies we need to get, if we fail to get a peaceful transition established, a plan, a contingency plan, because it may not happen, but some plan to say, this is how we can avoid the most severe consequences should that happen. If we fail at that, and AI does in the next several years result in the displacement of almost all humans in jobs, and there's no plan for what are we going to do with all those humans at that time, and potentially the top 1 or 2% of people that own everything at that point decide that the masses out there are a danger. They may come after us, like Mark Cuban, the billionaire, says, they're going to come after us with pitchforks. And if they're afraid that the masses will come after them with pitchforks, they might decide that they've got to take a preemptive strike to make sure that doesn't happen. They're not any use to us anymore. We don't need those people. For the first time in the world, the people on the top don't need the people on the bottom. They're not earning their wealth because of the labor of the people on the bottom. It's always been in feudal times and everything. The people that work the fields and whatnot, they are the ones that contributed to the wealth and protection of the wealthy. And for the first time, we're moving to a situation where that will not be true. And so we have to anticipate. We got to be like the weatherman, the meteorologist who's looking and saying, what's the path that the hurricanes might take? And how bad are they likely to be? And are we going to have tornadoes? And what kind of warnings do we send out? Or what kind of measures do we have to take to prevent this river from flooding or whatever? So that's what we're talking about here. But to Mark Henry's point, we've been talking about the dangers. Yes, the dangers have changed. They've been changing consistently for a while. But we see one of the biggest dangers out there is too many people are not aware of and concerned enough about some of these dangers. And so it's sort of like somebody that's driving around down a road and they see a little bit of water in the surface of the road and they just try to drive through and then they find out that the water's over the car and they drown. So we've just like all the broadcasts that say don't drive in water that you can't tell how deep it is, in the hopes that you're just going to drive through it. So, but we have to move from just talking about it to actually planning about it. And so we do have projects, and we've started talking in real concrete terms about the education solutions. I think we've got a true consensus of what we need to do with regards to education. And the discussion has to switch. How do we get that accepted and enacted? The same thing we've got for the engagement of how do we get for all the SDGs, how do we get the masses engaged? Because right now they're not engaged. People are going around about their daily life and they're just saying, oh, it's so sad those people are starving over there. But you know what? My job is to go sweep the floor in this museum. So I don't have time to worry about those hungry people. We've got to figure out how we get the engagement. So we've got about 7 projects that we've defined that could have major impact on getting people engaged. And the whole idea with this Pan-African Peace Conference gives us an opportunity to leverage something to kick off an initiative in Africa. We actually we had a number of students in Ghana mostly that were going to hold a competition where kids in schools in Ghana would create a presentation in each school of the Ghana that could be, the Ghana that they could visualize, that they would want, the future we want. It was tied to the whole Future We Want campaign at the UN. But these kids, their plan was they were talking to some TV channels to be able to announce this competition for young people to create videos that would present the Ghana that they would like to see if they had a magic wand and they could do anything. So those are the kinds of ideas that we're talking about on that. But the number one thing is how right now for today, it's all about awareness and concern so that people will act, because the dangers, we've got people who are in the AI industry talking about the dangers. We've got a handful, just a handful of people in politics talking about it. But the great majority of the decision makers, we don't know where they stand because they're not saying anything. It's almost like they're not aware. They're afraid to talk about it. We don't know, but we need to get them acting. We need to get them to realize that. And among ourselves, we have to realize how dangerous are these situations. Um, if the worst case happens, how severe could it be to our world? And there are several scenarios with AI, and there's one that just came out this last week pressuring the US government to go and implement some controls on the dissemination of DNA and RNA biological components or that can be used is the risk that AI uh, is working on or could be working on something that would create pandemics that are not like COVID pandemics that literally could wipe out 100% of populations within whatever target area they target. So this is the first thing we have to realize. Are we aware of the dangers? Do we believe it? Do we believe there's a risk? Do we believe how big is the risk? I personally, for example, believe that the risk on the job loss is somewhere 70 to 80%. It's not 10%, 15%. It's the majority here because we can look at the all of the people who say, "Oh, AI can never do this, it can never do that." Look at it's not achieving what it could do here. We're not seeing those movements. We're not seeing those job losses that way. So don't worry about it. We got more time. But that is that are that's some people saying some of those things. Do we believe it? Is it true? Why is it true and why is it not true? Because if we don't know that, we don't know how to judge the likelihood of certain things happening unless we analyze them and look at them. So I don't know how many of you got a chance to read the paper on the invitation to today's meeting. I posted a conversation that I had with Claude about the likelihood of AI exceeding the capabilities of all people. Oh, I know what the second thing. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but this just a couple of days ago, Anthropic issued another warning that AI is on the verge of becoming self-improving, truly self-improving, which would mean humans will lose control over the development of AI. So this is real. You can go and look in the news and see about that. How big a danger does that represent? Um, that's something that would have to be analyzed. Mark Henry, your thoughts on what I just was saying, because I got to stop rambling here.
Mm. No, I think we're broadly in agreement. We're moving in the same direction. So
Good.
I think we're broadly in agreement.
Uh-huh.
And I think you did your best as well to answer the question on whether the UN is still relevant.
Mhm.
Because I also was keen to hear your views. But I think from my perspective is I would say it's not the same organization that it was in the 50s, but for what we want to achieve, we're going to work with everybody. So the UN would be a fast starting point, and then we'll probably have to work with the regional players. I would see, for instance, the ASEAN, are they called ASEAN? They may actually give us more leverage when we say now we want to do something in Asia. In Africa, we may have to work through the African Union. We may have to make headway with the OECD. So, but as a starting point, we could start with the UN, and then if we find that it's not quite what we thought it was based on the history we thought, then as we start having the targeted interventions in the various regions, then we'll have to see, so who is the best placed
Absolutely.
partner at the time.
Yes, and absolutely, and because the UN is basically just creating the place for the discussions, and maybe pointing a little bit in the needs. I mean, let's face it, it's because of the UN that we even have the SDGs established, and that we've got basically 193 countries in the world that agreed, yeah, these are the goals we want to do. It's just that that's where it stopped. And yeah, there's some work in some of the agencies, but not significantly. So, but the thing about it is, it's not so much that the UN is in a position to solve these problems today, but if we want to try to make an impact, the UN is one of the kinds of bodies that could be valuable in helping push this agenda forward. So if we can leverage the UN to create momentum by, for example, getting the thousands of NGOs to agree to collaborate on some UN inspired initiatives. This would be great because we see here the member states, the countries have not been any more successful than the NGOs on most of the SDGs. We have twice as many SDG targets that have fallen back or are at the same place as 2015. Twice as many targets are there than have any chance of being achieved by 2030. So the problem is, though, when we looked, and this is for Rotary, because I originally looked at this stuff from the perspective of Rotary and said here, and I don't know if any of you are going to the convention in Taipei here later this month. I would be going. I had already paid and everything, and I had to cancel because of my back. But typically in the conventions, I would go around and I would ask people, what major world problems are closer to resolution today as a result of the efforts of Rotary over the last several decades? And with the exception of polio, which represents some tiny fraction of 1% of world problems, people look and then they say, oh, can't think of any. And when we look, we can look whether it's looking at education, whether it's looking at hunger, whether it's looking at inequality, we can see we're not making progress. These are Rotary areas of focus. So it's not just about the SDGs, but it's the question of, with all the efforts that we put in, Rotary does about 1 million projects are done by Rotary clubs every 5 years, about 200,000 projects a year. How can it be that we've done literally multi-millions of projects over the last few decades? How can it be that we can't point to any major world problem that's closer to resolution for all the effort we're putting in? So we've got to look and start to say, okay, what would it take for us to have that kind of impact? We've seen our presidents for the last 7, 8 years all talking about we need to have greater impact in the world. That's the secret for us to being able to grow our membership. If people think we're an organization that is accomplishing great things, that's an organization they will be proud to be members of. So we've got to go and make sure and see that we're doing things that actually are making a measurable difference. We need to do things that people will talk about, that the World Bank will talk about, that the major media outlets will be talking about. Rotary did this, Rotary did this. This is why on this initiative to come up with this AI nanny, if you would, or governess that will help families that are not in a position to provide their children at an early age from birth up to age 5, let's say, with the kind of rich experiences and language exposure and so forth and so on to be able to do that. We're looking to try to see if we can work with an organization like the X Prizes that would offer tens of millions of dollars to the first organization or company that is able to provide a low enough cost such solution that it could be made available to everybody that needs it. We're looking to call that the Rotary X Prize, the Rotary early childhood preparation, or close the early childhood preparation gap. It's the Rotary Initiative that we can do this. These are the kinds of things that if you can look that up, ask ChatGPT or whatever, how big a difference would it make if every child in families that currently are not able to provide their children with the in-depth language, verbal vocabulary, general knowledge of just about why is the sky blue type of thing, or the simple dialogue that helps develop those brain developments to create the mental maturity, if you would. If those children hit kindergarten and first grade with the same amount of exposure and communication that children of the wealthy families or the families that have the knowledge and the education and the time to spend all that time with the children. If the AI could do that equivalent, how big a difference would that make to education worldwide? Pakistan, for example, Pakistan has a problem that a relatively high percentage of children start first grade or kindergarten. But the dropout rate is very high because many of those children do not experience success in those first couple of years. And the question becomes, it's not worth it. Why bother? Let me go and do something that would earn some money for my family or whatnot, because they don't believe the education path is going to lead them to some kind of success. So Pakistan has a humongous dropout rate in the early grades, and with each successing grade, just the same as most of sub-Saharan Africa does. And so if we could go and provide these children so that their initial years are very successful and they don't lose any ground, and their confidence that this is taking them somewhere that could dramatically change the whole game. And so this is the opportunity for Rotary then that people are talking about. It. Rotary's changing the world. If we can lobby to get and we become known as the main champions of a global effort to get a global contingency plan for a peaceful transition to a post-labor economy, that we're the ones that are getting people talking about AI, the good and the bad, that gets the media saying, "Hey, Rotary's at it again. Rotary's doing this now. Rotary's calling that. Rotary's got a conference. They're bringing together these people. They're bringing together those people." This is the kind of thing that gets people saying, "Hey, Rotary is an important organization." And by doing that with the UN, the UN is, people are saying, "Oh, the UN is moving. They're doing something. Something's happening." And you can't, to the idea we can go and just solve the problems of each country individually isn't going to work. Same thing with climate change. You can't go. Pakistan is one of the a country that is suffering among the most in the world due to climate change. They don't cause it, but they're the ones that suffer the most. And yet, so what is needed from the perspective of Pakistan is international cooperation to address the problem. And so this is where I see that we can make a difference. But what we've got to do is start getting among ourselves and start saying, okay, hey, how can we create a conference? How can we bring these people together? How can
But
we
Bill,
create
in
awareness?
Pakistan, kids drop out of school for the reasons you said, but also because they have to work
No, yes, that's what I
and
meant.
they don't have food, even if they
Yeah,
do work.
yeah,
Malnutrition is the major issue in Pakistan.
yeah. No, you're correct on that. But what we see in a number of studies showing is that even where you have those conditions, where the children are successful in school and they and their families believe the school can lead to something, that they will make as big an effort as they can to stay in school and promote their education. But if they believe this isn't taking me anywhere, I'm not
Well,
making.
yeah. Most graduates in Pakistan are unemployed, so university admission has plummeted.
Yeah, yeah. And so but the idea here though is uh it gets back to, if we're looking and seeing something like climate change and things like this are important, they have to be addressed globally. It's if you've gone and said, okay, we don't have any more nuclear power plants in our country because we saw that people were dying because we have nowhere to put the waste uranium that and it's causing illness. So we got rid of it all in our country, but 10 kilometers across the border, there's four nuclear power plants. That really doesn't solve the problem. So the thing here is awareness and concern and a sense of urgency that needs to be brought in. And to what Mark Henry was saying, if we go and we can say right now, for the example of education, sometimes I struggle a little bit and say, well, if the jobs are all going to be gone in 5 to 10 years, why are we worried about primary school children when whether they have an education or not from the perspective of jobs isn't going to make any difference because there won't be any jobs. Um, but we still have to go and have developed these young people into thinking people. So if we can have an impact on things like that, we enhance our credibility to talk about other things that people maybe are not thinking about as much. So this is why promoting education is something that is strategically very important for us. Going here on the case of hunger and things like this gets back to getting people to really think about the problem, because we see here, I've participated in, Rotary has organized a number of events in the United States that brings hundreds of people together who pack food packets to because the United States has surplus of certain foods and pack this food and to be shipped off to developing countries. But I've had talks with some of the leaders of those NGOs, and they've admitted they pretty much have destroyed the agriculture industry where they're shipping that food because nobody's going to buy the local food if they can get for free or almost for free this food from elsewhere. So we've got to be able to look at big pictures and think of the unintended consequences of our actions. Hunger in the world is not because of lack of food. Hunger in the world is because of deliberate actions to make food scarce, to make sure there's not enough food for everybody so that people will compete and pay more for the food that's there. So there's not a shortage of food. There's just a shortage of people who have enough money to pay the going price for food. If everybody in the world had unlimited funds to pay for food, I guarantee you there would be so much food, nobody would know what to do with it because the food will people will invest to create the food if they know there's a market for it. At any rate, we're way into details. I wanted to get into some examples because when we talk, and I mentioned things like, well, what if the jobs start to disappear massively in 5 years? If in 5 years the university system is basically collapsing, we are already seeing in the United States some records in terms of the numbers of universities that are shutting down, basically going bankrupt. The enrollments in a lot of universities are declining rapidly. And a lot of that is because 80% of people that go to universities are going to universities to enhance their economic position, to improve their chances of getting a good job. When that disappears, why are people going to incur that huge uh, college debt when there's no return on investment? So the question is, do you believe that there's a high likelihood that in 5 years or maybe 10 years, that there will be very few jobs due to AI? Or do you believe, hey, like every technology until now, technology creates more new jobs than it destroys, so we don't need to worry? Or are you believing that things like, you know what, machines can't feel, so a machine can never offer empathy the way a human can? Do you think that there are certain inherent abilities of humans that the machines are not capable of doing? Therefore, there will always be a role for humans. What are your thoughts on that? Please let me know. Do you think AI will surpass every human ability within a relatively short time? Or do you think that is never going to happen? Or do you think if it's going to happen, there's a lot more time before it's going to happen? What are your thoughts on that?
I think some rogue state or will develop it to wipe out their enemy.
Um, well, we know we can see already the Ukraine. The Ukraine has reached the point where they're basically able to fight Russia to a standstill because they've developed drone technology to the extreme. They're the furthest along in that in the whole world, and uh, so we see it's possible. There's from China. There's a they've developed basically robot soldiers. They're not necessarily humanoid form, but robot soldiers that have reached the point where they're deployable to the field and into battle. And they don't have the numbers yet, maybe, but we know China is a country that is able to ramp up the numbers very quickly. And as I mentioned here, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, has described some of the AI weapons that have been developed in for the U.S. um, that are getting to be very real, and this is causing severe concerns about what's happening or what could happen, especially when we get into chemical and biological weapons, which AI is more easily capable of doing than robots that just simulate what a human soldier would do.
The states that will use AI soldiers against their own people as well, like
Yes,
China, Russia, Saudi.
Uh, that was one of the things that Amadei from Anthropic, that had contracts with the government, was basically saying that's a red line, that Anthropic would not provide the technology to be used against the citizens of the United States. And the government was not willing to commit to that. So that you're 100% right. It is almost unimaginable that countries are not planning to use AI to manage or control their own people, because that's what they've done since the beginning. It's sort of like here. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh, we're going to lose jobs." We expect companies to take measures to protect the employees. But we forget, wait a minute, it's those companies who are investing to figure out how to get rid of employees that's driving the AI race to a certain degree. In other words, the reduction in employees is not an accidental side effect of the AI development, it's the cause of a lot of the AI development, because companies are constantly looking and are required to look, in a capitalistic system. They're required to look to see, how do I maximize the efficiency? And some people say that's unethical. You're just maximizing your profits, and you don't care about your employees. But the ethics is a very tricky thing. When somebody starts a company because they have an idea how to create a medication or something like that that could help huge numbers of people, and they've developed this medication, their goal is to be able to provide that medication to as many people as possible. So they say, hey, we have to cut our costs so that we can make our medication available to help more people. And if the biggest cost is the labor costs, what should they do? Should they go and find an excuse to keep people employed if that employment means that hundreds of other people might die because they're not going to be able to afford the medication? Ethics is a very complicated thing. Um, but I said here, let me see if I can bring up I wanted to show you a couple of well, let me ask you first of all if anybody wants to see uh the an example of showing a very good side of AI, but also a side that shows how far along AI is in enabling us uh, to achieve so many things. Okay, hold on. Do you want to see that short video showing how the state of elder care due to AI? Is that something of interest?
Yes, that would be of interest.
Okay. Okay, so this is one.
While Americans are still sending their kids to school with a paper permission slip and a lunch card,
Just a minute here. It's going a little. Oh, here we go.
built one. Picture a small white robot. Nope. A small white robot sits on a bedside table in an
Okay, so share. Okay, can you see my screen? A little robot there. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can see.
Okay, so
They can see.
let me.
nursing home in Chengdu. It's 3 a.m. Everyone's asleep except one resident, an 82-year-old man who can't stop thinking about his son, who lives in Beijing and hasn't visited in 4 months. The robot notices he's awake. It says his son's name. It asks if he wants to talk. That moment is not a pilot program. It is not a prototype. It is Tuesday night in a country that decided aging deserved an engineering solution and then built one. Picture a small white robot no taller than a bedside lamp, perched next to an elderly woman who is mid-laugh. The robot just told a joke. It knows her daughter's name, her medication schedule, her favorite folk songs from the 1970s. When she can't sleep at 3 a.m. and doesn't want to bother a nurse, the robot is there. Reports from facilities across multiple Chinese cities document these companions reducing loneliness scores in elderly residents, not through novelty, but through consistency. The robot is always there. It never has another patient. It never has a bad shift. And here's the part that sounds like science fiction. It monitors her emotional state over time, flagging subtle shifts in mood to nursing staff before she's even able to articulate that something feels wrong. A call button requires you to know you need help. This system assumes you might need it before you do. But here's where it gets strange. The bed itself is watching. Beneath residents in some of China's more advanced care facilities, smart mattresses track heart rate, breathing rhythm, and body position continuously. No wristbands, no chest monitors, no equipment to forget or resist. The mattress simply knows. According to multiple sources, some facilities using these systems have reported significant drops in fall-related hospital admissions. But the more striking number is what happens before a fall. The mattress detects early respiratory deterioration hours before it becomes an emergency, giving nursing staff a window that simply doesn't exist in a care home running on call buttons and instinct. Think about what a call button requires. You have to be conscious. You have to be uninjured. You have to be within arm's reach of the wall. The mattress requires nothing. It just pays attention all night, every night, for every resident simultaneously. That's not even the impressive part. A robot glides silently down a long corridor and stops at exactly the right door. It announces lunch in a calm voice. The tray it's carrying isn't a random meal. It's built from a nutritional profile that accounts for this specific resident's sodium restrictions, swallowing difficulties, cultural food preferences, and caloric targets. Reports from facilities describe robots handling hundreds of meal deliveries per day with near zero errors, But the invisible part is what happens after the meal. A camera photographs the tray. Vision AI estimates how much was eaten. Appetite changes that often precede health decline get flagged before anyone notices them in a normal care setting. A nurse who spent 2 hours a day managing meal logistics now spends those 2 hours with patients. The robot never forgets a lactose intolerance. It never has 6 other rooms to get to and rushes the interaction. It just delivers and then reports back. The next one changes the logic entirely. In most countries, dementia wandering is treated as a containment problem. Locked doors, alarmed exits, hope. Chinese engineers looked at the same problem and saw a navigation challenge. Indoor positioning systems using combinations of Bluetooth, pressure pads, and infrared triangulation now track residents in real time across multi-floor facilities with location resolution that reaches down to under a meter. When a resident with dementia walks toward an exit, the door reads the situation before she reaches it. It doesn't open. A soft alert reaches the nurse 30 meters away, not a blaring alarm that distresses everyone on the floor. Her family gets an app notification if she leaves a designated zone, and the system isn't just reactive. It learns her normal movement patterns and flags deviations before anything dangerous occurs. That is not a locked door with a sign on it. That is a building that knows its residents. And then China did something no one expected. China has hundreds of millions of elderly citizens living in rural areas while their adult children work in cities. A separation that is structural, economic, and largely invisible to outside observers. The loneliness that results isn't incidental. It's one of the largest quiet health crises in the world. The response wasn't to tell people to call home more often. It was to build dedicated family contact platforms designed specifically for elderly users with poor vision, arthritic fingers, and zero smartphone literacy. Screens that auto-adjust contrast and font size, interfaces that require one button, and something called ambient presence mode, where a family member can simply be in the room as a soft background presence. No formal call required, just company. Reports suggest these platforms now serve tens of millions of users. That's not a video chat app. That's an infrastructure for not being alone. This next one doesn't make sense until you see the numbers. Depression in elderly care populations is catastrophically underdiagnosed everywhere in the world because residents rarely self-report and staff rarely have enough time for the kind of sustained observation that catches subtle shifts. In some Chinese facilities, cameras in common areas are running emotion recognition AI trained specifically on elderly faces, not a generic model repurposed from a consumer app. A system built for this population for this context. When a man's micro-expressions change across 3 consecutive mornings, a flag appears on a duty nurse's tablet. He gets a check-in. His son gets a call. A medication review is scheduled. He never hits the floor of an official quarterly assessment, never waits 3 months for someone to notice. The intervention happens in the gap between the problem forming and the problem becoming visible, which is exactly where most care systems aren't looking. That's not even the impressive part. An 80-year-old man who hasn't walked unaided in 3 years takes 7 steps down a corridor. He's wearing what looks like an exoskeletal leg brace, a rehabilitation suit that provides precisely calibrated assistance, adjusting in real time to his movement, giving exactly the support he needs and no more. Widely documented across rehabilitation centers in multiple Chinese provinces, these exoskeletons are being deployed not as specialty equipment for elite hospitals, but as standard physiotherapy tools in elder care facilities. The device records every session. It generates a recovery trajectory. It flags when a patient is progressing slower than expected, prompting clinical review before a stall becomes a plateau. Western physiotherapy at its best involves a skilled human therapist and 2 sessions a week if funding allows. This runs every day and reports every session. It does not take holidays, but it gets weirder. 20 elderly residents sit in a semicircle in a common room in Guangzhou. They're doing Tai Chi. The instructor at the front moves slowly, demonstrates each position, waits for everyone to follow. The instructor is a robot. Activity coordination in care homes is a staffing problem in every country. It's underfunded, often cut first when budgets tighten, frequently reduced to one overwhelmed human managing 40 residents 3 times a week. Reports from facilities using robot activity coordinators document something unexpected. Residents who refused group activities with human staff engaged with the robot. No social pressure, no embarrassment, no judgment. Just the program running every day, available whenever it's needed, and tracking participation the whole time. So when an individual's engagement drops over 2 weeks, it appears in the same dashboard as their health metrics. The thing is, this was already old news 3 years ago. A nurse in Shanghai pulls up a full care record for a resident who was just transferred from a facility in Chengdu. Vitals from the past 6 months, mood logs, nutrition intake, physiotherapy progress, all of it instantly, without a fax or a phone call or a form. China has been building what multiple sources describe as a national data integration layer connecting elder care facilities, hospitals, and family monitoring apps. The scale is genuinely difficult to hold in your head, and the downstream effect of that integration is a capability that doesn't exist in most Western healthcare systems. When a resident is transferred, the receiving doctor doesn't start from scratch. The history travels with the person. The system also feeds anonymized population data into models forecasting. Regional care demand years in advance, so facilities are planned before the crisis arrives, not after it does. And then China did something no one expected. A nurse gets an alert on her phone. Room 8, elevated fall risk in the next 4 hours. She walks in. The resident is fine. She adjusts his medication timing and asks about his sleep. He never falls. Falls are the leading cause of injury death in elderly populations worldwide, and most care systems respond to them after the fact. China's AI treats falling as a predictable event with identifiable precursor patterns, gait changes, vital sign trends, medication interactions, and updates each resident's risk score every 15 minutes. Not a daily snapshot. A continuous assessment running in the background of every room all day. This is already in production. Picture a drone descending into the courtyard of a rural care facility in a mountain province. No road access, no van, no waiting 3 days for a critical medication delivery. 18 minutes after the order was placed, it lands. Rural elder care faces geographic isolation everywhere in the world, and the standard answer is better roads and more drivers. China removed the need for roads. Drone healthcare logistics are reportedly operational across multiple provinces, and some networks are integrating demand forecasting AI, delivering supplies before a facility realizes it needs them, based on consumption patterns and resident health data. The infrastructure exists. It works. A woman sits in a reclining capsule. 8 minutes later, the door opens and she emerges, clean, dried, and dressed without a single human having touched her body. Automated bathing units are deployed across dozens of Chinese facilities and, according to multiple reports, are available as in-home rental equipment. The dignity dimension of this is not incidental. For many elderly residents, personal hygiene assistance is the most psychologically difficult part of facility care. The loss of privacy, the dependence, the system removes that. And while it bathes, it's also scanning. Pressure sore formation, unusual skin changes, anything that warrants clinical attention. A routine becomes a diagnostic. A woman is sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. She's 84 years old and she's afraid the way people sometimes get afraid when they're alone and it's very late and they've lived a long time. She's talking to a screen. The screen listens. It responds. It does not tell her everything is fine. It asks questions. It stays. Facility staff report that residents who access AI end-of-life conversation support at night are less distressed by morning, not because the AI solved anything, but because 2 a.m. in a care facility can be very silent, and silence at that hour has weight. The system is designed with one explicit guardrail. It is a bridge, not a destination. When a conversation warrants human follow-up, a flag is raised. Someone comes in the morning, but the night is covered. An 82-year-old man lives alone in an apartment in Wuhan. He has no wearables. Nothing visible has changed in his home. His daughter, 400 kilometers away, gets a daily health summary every morning on her phone. His refrigerator usage, sleep patterns, bathroom frequency, and activity level are all ambient proxies for health, and the apartment is reading all of them invisibly without requiring him to do a single thing differently. According to multiple sources, smart home elder care integration now covers millions of households across Chinese cities, built into housing stock as infrastructure rather than add-on technology. When the patterns break, when the refrigerator isn't opened, when the bathroom light doesn't come on at its usual time, a community health worker is notified, not him. He just lives his life. In most countries, a smart home is a way to control your lights. In China, it's already something else entirely. On
Okay. So what do you think?
I'm moving to China.
No, well, be careful here. I'm sure that that when you see things like this, you have to realize sometimes things are generalized that are in labs, or yeah, maybe it's being experimented in one place. But don't make assumptions. I have to admit, it's 10 years since I spent any significant amount of time in China. And I can believe this because what I saw with my own eyes was already so far advanced over what I saw in Europe and in North America. But what it's showing is things that are capable. So imagine now we saw that example of the robot there that is watching the emotions of elderly patients there. If that works like that and it tells them stories and it does all these different things, how close are we to being able to have that same little robot there dealing with young children and telling them stories and asking them questions and explaining to them about what they see, that whole serve and return aspect. Yes, Mark Henry.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, when I saw this, it kind of reminded me of a time when I was still the vice president of the Wild Road Association.
May
And
14th,
I was
2020.
telling them that much of the Western world would have problems with, for instance, releasing autonomous vehicles onto the street. They should start looking at countries like mine, Uganda, and come and pilot some of these things, because the tolerances that one has to certain things like failure or privacy or whatever, somehow our society is so structured that we're willing to give progress a chance. And I think that goes to decades, maybe even centuries of legal protocols.
A lunch card that
So
half the time
I
doesn't
can imagine this is happening in China, and maybe they are even well ahead of what they're
scan.
showing us.
Chinese children
But
are
I would
walking through school
imagine
gates that
another
recognize their
contrast to
face in
that would be people would be saying, "Hey, how about the privacy? You've got this apartment monitoring these people. Their rights, their human rights, and where is the data stored? And
Yeah.
who gives authorization and this kind of thing." So I look at this and I say this now probably justifies why we will have to, when we start, say, pushing for beneficial AI deployment to solve the world's greatest problems. We will have to do what, for instance, the developers of M-Pesa did, because
Yeah.
M-Pesa, I think, is a technology out of the United States.
No, it's out of
But I think
Africa.
because
That's an
no,
African
it was
technology.
it was deployed in Kenya first,
Yes.
but it was developed. I think it was developed either in Europe or in the United States. But you could get traction because people are more open
Mhm.
to technology and new things, and the consequences of getting it wrong, you're not going to get sued for
Yeah.
tens of billions. You'll have to go and talk to the family and explain and apologize and this kind of thing. It's not going to be something that's going to crush the deployment of technology,
Yeah.
because
It's
I could see that we are seeing this and we are seeing the benefits, but I can imagine another group of litigious people are preparing to file. Let this thing hit London and we'll be billionaires, you know.
You know, this is one of the reasons why I personally believe Africa, a number of countries in Africa and countries like Pakistan could leapfrog development taking place in Europe and North America, simply because there are so many barriers put in place of making progress in those countries. And I've just set up to be able to show you a similar video about what's going on with the most advanced schools in China, because that's equally impressive. But the thing here that I think is important to look at is what is possible. Okay, because there's two aspects, what you do, but what is possible. And in a lot of cases in the West, a lot of the people say, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. It's sort of like, why don't we have um, cameras on the highways that automatically detect and speeders and take pictures of them? You have that in Europe. It's all across Europe. But in the United States, we say we're not fair to the speeders. We should give the speeders a fighting chance to break the law. And so it's considered to be a privacy thing, that you're invading people's privacy if you catch them doing a crime. And this prevents so many things. And like you say, it creates fear among the people who have the solutions, who can who look at these. Very often we see the solutions that are developed in the United States are implemented first somewhere else. And there's a story I heard about Elon Musk of Tesla. Um, Tesla was the first car company that really went all out in AI in cars, in the whole self-driving car arena. And they were so far ahead, probably more than 10 years ahead of what was going on in anywhere else. And then along came a car company in China. I think it was maybe around 2016, 2017. And in just a few years, they closed about 7 years of gap to where Tesla was at. And this caused Tesla to realize they had to move a lot of their R&D to production to China. Why? Because in the United States, Tesla practiced, they took their self-driving cars and they had them go on disciplined roads where everybody was following the rules, and the streets were very clear. And so there was not a lot of variation. Whereas in China, the car companies put their cars on the road in Chinese cities that were chaotic, that traffic was everywhere. People were on motorbikes crossing everywhere. And so they were able to capture a much larger set of variation situations much faster. And that's what let them close the gap so quickly to where Tesla was at. So Tesla said, hey, we need to be testing our cars, and which is really not testing. What it is training, because the cars, they capture through the sensors things that are happening around it. And it also captured, what did the driver do? And then, is that what the driver did? Did it result in a good result, or did it result in a bad result? And so in this manner, it was able to detect what would be the good actions to take in various situations. And it learned and built up that repertoire of situations and reactions very quickly. And at the end of the day, that's what counts in a self-driving car. You don't want the self-driving car to say, oh, okay, it's going to be great as long as the road is straight and it's dry and it's well marked and so forth and so on. You want that car to be able to successfully navigate all the situations that might happen. And so that's what they were able to do in China. And as a result, you have huge numbers of self-driving taxis deployed in cities throughout China, developing much faster than anything in the West. The uh, so the But what I was trying to bring out is when we talk about the opportunity, for example, in AI, to uh, provide something's missing, where we have families where maybe it's a single parent household, they don't speak the local language, the parents themselves never had a chance to get an education, they're working three jobs, they don't have the time to spend with their children as much as possible. And so the children are not getting that brain development and that rich interaction that's required for proper brain development. The ability to have that robot that is able to see everything that's going on, to be able to tell the child, "Whoops, stop, wait, be careful, don't do that." To be able to tell them stories, to be able to ask them, "What do you think is going to happen next?" All that constant interaction all day long creates the opportunity that that child, when they hit school, they're no longer 2 to 4 years behind, with no chance to ever catch up. There's so many studies that show school cannot make up for that early brain development deficiency. But we could do that with these tools. And that video I just showed you shows that what they're doing with the elder care in many cases is very similar to what we would want to do with those early children, early childhood development. I have a second one here, and the second one is where to go? Oh, yeah. The second one here is looking at the schools. So this is what's happening in some of the advanced schools. Now, I need to preface this with saying China, in many ways, for delivery, for the transmittal of information and so forth, is really great. And they have the motivation that you can't believe because school education is basically free or almost free, but it is extremely competitive. And they know that the children put in extreme amount of efforts. The only place that puts in more than China is South Korea, where they've got a problem that they actually have the police have to go around at night and break up study groups after midnight because the kids won't stop studying. And as a result, South Korea has the highest percentage of population with university development. And given that 40 years ago, 50 years ago, South Korea was one of the worst countries in the world for education, that's just absolutely mind-boggling that they've been able to do that. So, but China has the same thing, and they very much are not mastery based. They're calendar based. Their education system is almost more about rating and sorting children into you're the smartest, you're not so smart. And so the idea of a mastery base that has everybody being equally educated in the end is not in their interest. Their interest is being able to separate out the children who can learn faster from the children who learn not so fast. That's the bad side. But what they're doing in the schools is very interesting. So let's play this.
While Americans are still sending their kids to school with a paper permission slip and a lunch card that half the time doesn't scan, Chinese children are walking through school gates that recognize their face in under a second, automatically log their arrival, and send their parents a notification before the kid has even found their seat. No touching anything, no stopping, no line. Just recognized, logged through, and that's literally the first thing that happens in the morning. Reports suggest facial recognition entry systems are now in place across thousands of Chinese primary schools, with scans completing faster than a blink. But the part that actually gets me is what comes with it. The same system that opens the gate can also detect whether a child's temperature is elevated, flag if they arrived late, and alert staff all before the first bell rings. Western schools are still buzzing visitors in through a single intercom. China built an airport-grade entry system for 6-year-olds, and once they're inside, what they walk into is even more surprising. While most Western teachers are still hauling home a stack of 30 worksheets to grade on a Sunday night, Chinese students are photographing their homework with a phone, and within 3 seconds, every answer is circled, scored, and returned with written feedback. Not tomorrow, not after the weekend, tonight, before they've had dinner. Widely documented AI grading platforms reportedly process millions of student submissions per day across China's school network. But here's the part that makes this genuinely different from any grading app you've seen. The AI doesn't just mark right or wrong. It identifies which specific step in a problem the child failed, not just which problem, and automatically adjusts the next day's practice set to target exactly that gap. Your kid doesn't know they're being tutored by an algorithm. It just feels like the homework got weirdly easier to understand. But here's where it gets crazy. While Western kids are losing their lunch money in the school corridor, Chinese students are paying for their lunch with their face. No card, no cash, no wallet, a face. The canteen lines reportedly move so quickly that in some schools, thousands of students pass through in under 20 minutes, with zero fumbling, zero card declined moments, zero forgetting what your PIN is. Parents receive a receipt showing not just the transaction, but exactly what their child ate. Nutritional data included. And if a child's meal choices show a pattern over time, consistently skipping vegetables, consistently not eating enough protein, the system flags it automatically to the school nurse. China doesn't mess around with logistics. Now here's one that fixes a problem most Western parents don't even know exists because they've never thought about it as a solvable problem. China has one of the highest rates of childhood myopia in the world. Kids staring at books, hunching over desks, reading in poor light, and instead of just handing out more glasses at the end of the year, they built the desk itself into the solution. Smart desks with sensors embedded in the surface monitor how far a student's face is from their workbook. When it drops below a critical threshold, a gentle audio prompt plays, a soft beep, a nudge. The teacher's screen shows a real-time posture map of the entire class, not as a surveillance measure, as a health intervention happening in the moment damage would otherwise occur. Some versions reportedly alert parents if a child shows sustained poor posture patterns over time, turning a piece of school furniture into a preventive health device. We're treating myopia after the fact. China is interrupting it before it starts. You think that's impressive? Wait. Because now we're inside the classroom and the camera at the front knows which student just zoned out. Not guessing, measuring. Facial micro expressions, gaze direction, head position, all feeding into a live engagement dashboard the teacher can glance at from their desk. Each student is a small square on the screen. Each square has a score. The score updates in real time as the lesson progresses. And here's what changes everything. A teacher who can see engagement dropping at minute 22 of a lesson has the option to pivot before they lose the room. Lesson pacing becomes a data decision, not an intuition. Multiple sources report these. Attention monitoring systems are deployed across Chinese schools, analyzing not just who is distracted, but when, down to which specific segment of a lesson caused the drop. The system gives feedback on the teaching, not just the students. This is actually happening right now. But it gets weirder because before we even get to the AI teachers and the robots and the brainwave headbands, and yes, those are all coming, we need to talk about the homework pen, a pen that teaches your child as they write the wrong answer. Reports document AI-assisted smart pens for children widely available in Chinese schools and homes, tracking stroke order, character accuracy, and writing pressure in real time. When a child forms a character incorrectly, the pen vibrates. Once, gently. A hint appears on a paired tablet. The child pauses, reconsiders, rewrites. And here's what makes this genuinely different from a digital learning app. The intervention happens at the exact moment the wrong habit would otherwise form. Not reviewed later, not corrected the next day, interrupted in the act. Some of these systems reportedly build a learner profile from writing speed, pressure, consistency, and stroke hesitation. Data that can help identify underlying writing difficulties before they become learning gaps. A pen, doing what a specialist assessment used to take months to arrange. This next one will break your brain. In the time it takes a Western school district to complete the planning permission paperwork for a new school building, China has finished building the school. We're talking fully operational primary schools, classrooms, desks, whiteboards, IT labs, sports halls, assembled in days to weeks using modular prefabricated construction. Multiple sources document entire campuses built in response to population shifts, with buildings that can be partially dismantled and relocated if a district's demographics change. A new residential development opens. Within a month, the children who moved in have a school they can walk to. No temporary porta cabins, no busing to a school 3 towns over, no waiting list. The building arrives to meet the demand. While Western cities are still debating site surveys, China is moving in the furniture, and the scale of what fills those buildings dedicated subway access, and in some cases, on-campus medical facilities and weather stations for science.
Uh, just let me, I just wanted to highlight something that was just mentioned there, and that is the speed of building these schools. We know that for a while here, the construction, for example, I think 2 weeks ago, I reported about a train station, a humongous train station that would have taken here a decade to build in the United States that was built in several months. I think it was about 5 or 6 months, and included robots in the construction crew. But the yes, Stuart Martin earlier said, "Hey, one of the major differences is China's an autocratic system, so they decide we're going to do this, they just do it." Whereas in the West, we have so many parties that can raise objections, to cause delays, that you have to go through so many different tests and so many approval levels, and that all increases not just the time to get anything done, but tremendously the cost to get things done. And when it comes to like building schools and things like that, this is crucial because if it takes you 5 years to build a school in a rural area or a new area, that's potentially 5 years that those kids don't have a school. So it's something to be considered, but that gets into the same issue we were talking about of how do we get the places like the United Nations or in places like some of the democratic countries to start talking about planning, creating a contingency plan for a post-labor economy when you've got all these different people that are expressing different views. And some are saying, no, let's not do that now. We don't need that. It's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen right away. Let's do something else in the meantime. And it's going back and forth and back and forth. And you don't have any concentration of effort on achieving results quickly. I think this is going to come to a head in the not too distant future between autocratic and supposedly democratic societies, whereby I think a lot of democratic societies are not so much the democratic as you've got interest groups that are abusing the the democratic idea to be able to accomplish their personal or individual goals. So, but this is something I think that has to be paid attention to. That may be one of the reasons why China, between 1980 and 2020, jumped from being in the very worst educated population in the world to being 10% above the second place school system in the world in terms of education outcomes. And that's according to the OECD PISA results. Okay, let me continue here.
science programs. Widely documented across multiple Chinese cities, these campuses aren't logistical disasters. They're logistical triumphs, technologically managed and scheduled with a precision that makes a normal school's timetable look like a post-it note. When you see 10,000 uniformed kids flowing through corridors in perfect synchronized waves, you don't think, how is this possible? But here's where it gets crazy again. Because when you have this many schools, this many students, and a persistent gap between the quality of teachers in cities versus rural areas, you don't just accept that some kids get worse education because of geography. You solve the geography. China's national education broadcast infrastructure delivers live lessons. One elite teacher in a studio performing a lesson simultaneously to classrooms in provinces thousands of kilometers apart. Same lesson, same moment. A student in a rural area with a single overwhelmed teacher gains access to the country's top-ranked instructors in mathematics and science the same morning as a student in central Beijing. Multiple sources report these systems have delivered synchronous live lessons to tens of millions of students simultaneously. And the part that makes it more than just educational television, AI reportedly personalizes the broadcast, inserting locally relevant examples, adjusting pacing for classrooms that are lagging, flagging regions where comprehension scores drop below threshold. This isn't coming in 2030. This is happening right now. We're in science fiction territory. Except none of this is fiction. While Western schools are still debating whether to allow phones, some Chinese schools have replaced the classroom itself with an immersive simulation. VR classrooms, where a chemistry lesson on molecular bonding isn't read from a textbook but physically navigated. Students reportedly reach toward holographic atoms, trace the bonds with their fingers, walk through scaled molecular structures. Historical lessons become virtual field trips, entering ancient cities, sitting inside historical events, asking questions of AI-voiced simulations of historical figures that respond in character. Reports suggest VR subject labs have moved from pilot to standard infrastructure in multiple major Chinese cities. Students retain spatial learning at measurably higher rates than two-dimensional instruction, and teachers can run 30 students through the same immersive environment simultaneously with the precision of a lesson plan, not the chaos of an actual field trip. What if the technology doesn't just simulate the lesson, but teaches it? AI teaching assistants are now operating in real Chinese classrooms, not as a screen playing a video, but as responsive systems that handle spoken questions, detect confusion in a student's voice, and adjust their explanation style mid-response. Widely documented platforms handle interactive Q&A, concept explanation, and adaptive problem generation across primary and secondary settings. In rural areas where teacher shortages are acute, these systems allow a human teacher to handle creative subjects while the AI handles computation and drill practice. A deliberate split, not a stopgap. And for students at home at 9 in the evening who don't understand long division, the AI assistant walks them through it, again differently, more slowly, from a different angle, without frustration, without running out of patience, without needing to be anywhere else. A single student, a single gap fixed tonight. And then the robot arrives at the classroom door. A wheeled autonomous robot navigating the school corridor. Students step aside, it pauses, detects the gap, proceeds, arrives at a classroom, lid opens, books inside, or supplies, or returned lost property. Because the same robot fleet reportedly cross-references facial recognition logs to identify which student an item belongs to and delivers it automatically. A teacher orders supplementary materials mid-lesson via an app, zero interruption, zero administrative overhead. The delivery arrives before the period ends. Reports document autonomous delivery robots operating across Chinese school and university campuses, handling inter-building logistics that, in Western schools, are managed by a teaching aide with a trolley. China looked at campus logistics and said, this is an engineering problem, then they engineered it. Now, the last three. Western parents put their phones down for these. Every child in a Chinese school from age 6 reportedly has an AI-generated personalized study plan, updated weekly, built from continuous micro-assessment data, not a semester report, not a teacher's intuition, a living document adjusted by an algorithm that tracks which concepts a student is absorbing, which are slipping, and how their trajectory is moving relative to national benchmarks. EdTech platforms documented across China reportedly serve hundreds of millions of students with this level of individualization. A child struggling with fractions gets more fraction problems automatically without anyone noticing the gap first. A child approaching a national exam with a measurable risk profile gets flagged 6 months out, early enough to intervene. Every child, functionally, has an individual education plan, updated by a machine, every single week. Here's the part that makes no sense until it does. Cameras in some Chinese classrooms don't just track attention. They read emotion, facial expression, body language, micro movement, processed by AI systems that reportedly categorize a student's emotional state in real time. Focused, distracted, anxious, fatigued. A child who arrives stressed after a difficult morning is flagged before the teacher would normally notice. A quiet check-in is prompted. One intervention changes the trajectory of the day, but the aggregate data does something even stranger. It maps which lessons, which schedules, and which classroom configurations correlate with elevated stress. Across the student body, administrators can identify the sources of systemic anxiety and redesign the environment to reduce them, not reacting to crisis, preventing it, emotion as data, well-being as infrastructure. And the last one, a row of children wearing slim white headbands. On the teacher's desk, a screen showing each child's real-time brainwave focus score as a glowing number. These are EEG headbands, measuring neural oscillation patterns associated with focused cognitive engagement, and reports document them in operational pilot classrooms in China. Not a concept, not a lab, a Tuesday morning. When a student's focus score drops, the teacher is prompted, not guessing, not scanning the room for glazed eyes, directed precisely to the student whose brain is drifting at the moment it starts to drift. And the data from these pilots is reportedly being used to reverse engineer the optimal lesson structure, mapping which curriculum sequences produce the highest sustained focus states across a classroom, not observing how children learn, measuring it from the inside. By the end of this, you are supposed to understand why China feels 10 years ahead. It's not one technology. It's not one policy. It's that they are running all of this simultaneously across a school system serving hundreds of millions of children while we're still figuring out.
Okay. So again, I really feel there's probably a healthy dose of propaganda in these videos, but I do believe that that a significant amount of this type of thing is taking place. I've seen enough different reports on some schools. I don't. Uh, I have some severe doubts about how widespread and about how much all parts of China are included, because I do believe there's a significant uh, difference in the education systems in some of the remote areas and especially some other parts of Western China. However, for at least 20, 30 years now, China has had a policy of encouraging people to move from remote villages into newly created cities. And a big part of the reason is because they couldn't figure out a way to be able to provide equitable services in education and healthcare and so forth to a lot of these rural villages in the mountains or just geographies that are difficult that might not have the water. Sanitation is more difficult. The transportation infrastructure is more difficult. So they've been moving people into these newly constructed cities that have, right from the get-go, all of the education, healthcare, and other infrastructure type capabilities. But your thoughts as to what you heard, it shows as a minimum, China has this approach to say there's a problem. Okay, who's got a fix? Okay, implement the fix, and they do move forward quickly. Maybe it's changed, and more recently, there's a lot higher percentage of things that are developed in China. I can say when I was traveling there, there was a lot of the technology that they were importing from the West. But I do have to say, even back then, I was just blown away by the education level of the young people that I met there. Yes, Mark Henry.
Thank you. No, I did have a chance to watch this among the tens of videos that I managed to get. So I think our focusing algorithms are beginning to converge. And what I saw in it, you do mention something, which is how much is real, how much is propaganda. That is also one thing to think about. I was looking at it and saying how much is possible, because I was not looking at this as China. I was looking at this and saying, yes, we've in the past in this group, we've talked about the challenges in Texas. We've talked about the experiment in Ghana. We've talked about the experiment, I think, somewhere in India. I'm also looking at in the context of the 40 or so countries I've managed to travel and work with across the world, and see what are the kind of things that can work where. So when I was looking at these are the kind of things I look at as idea seeding videos, because they're saying what is potentially possible. I mean, even if it is not true, it could be, say, like if it were coming out of a Chinese company and they're trying to justify funding from the government, that's okay. But what they're saying is the tools are there. As to whether it has been deployed, it could be somebody reporting of what has been. It could be somebody looking for capital, and so they're pitching it out there.
Yep.
Like the way we're now having SpaceX and OpenAI being pitched, because there's going to be an IPO. So whether what is there is going to be realized in the next few years, but it is giving an indication of what's possible. And I think for a group like ours, it's important that as we are coming up with our action mix, we kind of keep tabs on what's the state of technology, and we be deliberately optimistic, as in like, okay, fair enough, these things could all be used for bad. There is that possibility, but we be in the camp of those who are saying, now let's look at these things critically and see how can we deploy them for good.
Yeah, and I think here, especially, we talked about here, and they mentioned it in the video, the surveillance aspect and the privacy aspect, which would cause many schools in the United States to block this kind of technology. And we have to be very careful. Are they really blocking it because they're concerned about the privacy of the students, or are they blocking it because they're afraid that this kind of technology could impact their jobs eventually? It's sort of like in the medical field that we talk so much about privacy, and yet at the same time we sort of say, well, can we expect to get good health care if we don't tell our doctor what's ailing us? We want the doctor to know what's going on with us and what we need help on. And it's the same thing with the teachers. Now, one of the things that I find that's interesting is, yes, this is talking about a lot of really advanced technology. What we're finding, and I believe you don't need that technology. You can make huge progress with very low cost technology. There's a platform out of the UK called Century Tech. Century Tech will actually take each student, and it tracks everything every student's doing. And if a student makes a mistake on anything, it analyzes what the cause of the mistake is. And if it finds out that oh, okay, you were trying to do long division, but really the problem is you're weak on multiplication. It'll automatically reroute the student back to the multiplication, fix the multiplication knowledge gap, and then take them back to the long division. So it literally holds the student's hand through the entire education process. That and this is some other platforms that are very similar to that. In China, they've got one, it's called Squirrel Schools, that is using technology this way. But uh, if we look here at that teacher that I mentioned a lot, Tim Vandenberg, it's a very low scale technology. Um, uh, yes, they broke down, just like every textbook, it breaks down all the learning into all the micro steps of things you have to learn along the way to really comprehend an entire subject matter. Uh, and it defines the dependency process or sequence. So yeah, you need to know this before you can learn that. Uh, but the key, what it does is it has an assessment module that checks, hey, have you mastered this particular segment? If you have, now you can go on to these are the ones you can go on to where you've mastered all the prerequisites, and it lets you progress through that, but it never puts you in a situation where you're having to try to learn something that you've not mastered all the prerequisites for. And uh, that is basically the key to the whole thing. We're just gonna make sure that you don't progress to where we're asking you to do something you're not ready for. It also includes links to things like videos, tutorials, and stuff like that, and they're all free. So you can implement Khan Academy very, very low cost, just simply by having, I mean, literally, you could do a Raspberry Pi in a classroom that costs like $50 for a server, or maybe for a whole school. I don't know what the limit, and some very low cost tablets that the kids share for an hour, and another group shares it. So that you could implement that very quickly. And the results that we see from schools that have done that and implemented that as mastery based with personalized learning where the students are learning at their own speed, the success is mind-boggling. It's equivalent to the Alpha School, and the Alpha School costs something like $60,000, $70,000 per student per year. Now, they don't need that kind of money, probably. They had some extra costs for R&D early on, but they're able to use techniques. They even use Khan Academy part of the time. But what I'm thinking here is um, that we see the direction, we see the possibilities. How do we take the first step? And I think there's an opportunity in some developing countries uh, to where there might be more freedoms in a school to try something new, where maybe a school is saying, hey, we want to have the reputation here that if you come to our school, you're going to graduate at the top of the knowledge spectrum here and have all kinds of opportunities open to you, so that we literally could help deploy some of these technologies in schools at very, very low cost. Khan Academy is available in, I don't know, 60 languages. I think there's a huge amount of opportunities out there. And just imagine what it would do for the psyche of a developing country if all of a sudden here on something like the PISA exams, the OECD PISA exams, which compare the education outcomes of countries, if a developing country was to all of a sudden be listed as one of the top 10 countries in the world for education outcomes, what that would mean for the entire population in their belief in themselves of what they can accomplish. So that's something here I would definitely like to explore to see, and maybe we can do this with this idea of this peace event, Pan-African peace event, working together, maybe bringing all the Rotary clubs in Africa together and saying, let's figure out how do we create a movement or something where all of a sudden here Africa's not striving just to be able to provide access to an education institution to young Africans, but that Africa has set a goal or countries in Africa have set a goal to be among the top countries in education outcomes in the world. And not just for the elite schools, for the top few percent of students in the major cities, but being able to create that in throughout the country. Even if you don't have internet, there's a thing called Khan Academy Lite that will work without a standing internet connectivity, where somebody can, on a bicycle, can travel around every couple of weeks, and you swap out thumb drives, which synchronize what's going on in the local school with the information that is in the cloud that's able to track the longer term progress. Okay, we are at 11:51. We really didn't go through the question of do you believe AI is going to or has a serious possibility that it could basically obsolete human labor within 5 to 10 years for a significant amount. You have to remember, for most of the Western world, a 30% unemployment rate is enough to crash the whole economy. Especially, we're not talking 30% unemployment rate of the people that have traditionally always been unemployed. We're talking about a 30% unemployment rate among people who have been the better earners in that country for some time. And the Western economies operates on debt. So those people have college loans, they've got house mortgages, they got car loans, they got credit card bills. And if they lose their jobs and their incomes, they're not able to pay back their loans. And it doesn't take a lot of that to crash the financial system. For the banks, who are generally lending out money they don't have because of the reserve system, the way the reserve system works, but when that payment doesn't come back, they're not able to pay the people they borrowed the money from that they're lending out. And it would crash things quite quickly. And we have to remember that those middle class people who would be losing their jobs, people that normally have had a good income, they stop spending. They don't go to restaurants. They don't take vacations. So you get a ripple effect that goes throughout the entire economy very quickly. So the question really is this likely to happen? Or is that crazy? Just like on the good side, is that just all hype, or is that real? And so I think this is why I believe it was very important for us today to look and try to get a realistic picture for what is the situation for AI, and to be aware it's not a question of saying, oh, well, we can already see the train coming. We know that's going to happen, but also to judge how much risk can we afford to take? How severe, if certain levels of situations happen, how severe is that for us? Is it just something, it's sort of like, yeah, I got COVID and it made me sick for a couple of weeks. Or is it Ebola and I'm going to die? Okay. So, how much risk am I willing to take? in what kind of situations. Any last comments on today's session? And otherwise, I will call today's session to an end. Please, comments. Was this useful today? Is this
Sorry
something?
about my voice, Bill. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think it's important to gain the understanding of the extreme risks ahead as we strive to be the trusted body of information to deliver these things to the individuals and organizations that seek to make those large scale pivots. There's no way that we will be able to accomplish that type of mass mobilization at just the grassroots level.
Mhm.
So I think that us gaining an understanding of the specific existential threat in our most immediate timeline is very important. And thank you so much for this session. It was very important.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. And I think here, you in your relative countries, each of you, you have to ask yourself, how big an issue is this in your country? How much are people talking about? What are we going to do if? What are we going to do if the developed world pulls all of the production that they've exported to our country, if they pull it back to their countries and just let the robots do the work? And I think it's BYD in China, car manufacturer. They just they have just have an AI um, car design thing that actually designs and then builds the chassis of cars. And I think now they're building the chassis of a car in under 1 minute with robots. We know the Xiaomi factory in China, they turn out a smartphone, a world-class smartphone. Every I don't want to. I don't remember if it's every minute. I think it's every second, but it could be every minute. But guess what? There's no lights in that factory. There's no heat in that factory. Why? Because there's no humans working in that factory. It turns out the whole process. And there's several car manufacturers now in China that are working to be able to turn out cars with no human workers. Now, even if they reduce that to one or two, they're going to be able to probably sell cars for about 20% of the cost of what it costs to buy a similar car from the United States or Europe. Um, and so if you're in a developing country and you say, well, it would really help if people had better transportation, and you can buy buses and trucks and things like that at 10 or 20% of the cost of what it would cost you to buy it from the Western countries, where are you going to buy it from? Plus, it's a lot easier for a country to export an entire factory in a box, if you would, to be able to let a developing country move production to their country because you don't have to go through a 10-year process of training workers for the highly skilled jobs or even a couple of months to train people for the lower level jobs. And as we saw in China, talking about how they're able to build schools in weeks that take, in some cases, years, in some cases, decades in countries like the United States. If you're sitting in an African country and you need schools, and you can build a school for a tenth of the cost in a tenth of the time with Chinese assistance versus Western assistance, where are you going to go? So I think the possibility for developing countries to be able to themselves develop so that in 20 years, they're in a position to be able to show other parts of the world how they can develop. I think that's real. And I think a lot of people would say, nah, it can't happen. It's so all the development's got to come from the developed countries. Uh, I think the first thing we need to get rid of is that attitude and to start really realizing, the only thing that's truly impossible is that which is not attempted. And when Steve Jobs said, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. We asked a number of young people, especially most of them actually came from Africa. We asked a number of young people, why do you think he thought that? And the conclusion was, well, because only the people who think they can try, and only those who try can succeed. So the thing when we talk about Vision Africa 2030, the main thing we're talking about is how do we go and get everybody in Africa to try? How do we get everybody to be a striver? Because unless we can get the bulk of the population to be trying, the chances of succeeding are very, very low. Okay, with that, I say thank you, everyone, for sticking with us again today. And we're going to be talking about education, and we're going to talk about Vision Africa in the upcoming meetings. So I hope you will join us then. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye now.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.